Hey, we have about 3 days until Art Fight starts. And the teams have been announced, which means it's time to work on attack borders. So, come with me on my design process for them. And a resource to help you design your own borders. Oh, and the borders I design in this video will be available for download as well. Rather than trying to perfectly plan everything for my Art Fight borders, I take a pretty organic, relaxed approach. Typically, I see people try to fit the theme and keep it pretty simple. But if I'm being real, I like painting. I like shutting my brain off and just vibing while I do these Art Fight attack borders. And I try to let them come out as a piece of art themselves. Now, obviously, you don't have to do that yourself. But here's a peek at the previous borders I've made for myself and friends to use, where I took that more painterly approach. I think they turned out pretty cool. With that, grab your pencils or stylus and listen along while I walk you through my experience making Art Fight borders this year. Or just watch me work, whatever works for you. I'm not picky. I started off doing some pre-production for my process, which in this case means gathering my references of this year's teams and my previous year's borders. Now, I didn't just arrange them all in a very pretty pure ref board. I took a critical look at each of my references and figured out what was important about it. The proportions, the colors, the motifs, anything that could help me design this year's borders. Taking the time to analyze these designs matters because it helps me to create a shopping list, artistically speaking. Anytime I'm not sure what to do design-wise, I can look at that shopping list and try to pick a few things off of it to incorporate. It makes my life super easy. And I do a very similar thing when designing characters, so if you want to see that, there's a link in the description to that. Hello! Quick note from Editing Grim here. I forgot to mention there will be no video next week because I will be on my quarterly vacation. So, I will see you back on July 11th. Alright, that's it. Back to the video. After that, my real next step was to make a template. I set up everything I might need for an attack border to speed up the process later, both for this year and for future years. And I also included quite a few features on my template because you know I love a good technical tool. I love tinkering. For one, the year is pre-placed and sized, so all I have to do in the future to start out is tweak the font and colors. Obviously I'll still paint over it, but it's a good base, and that's the point. I also made a guide to help me place decoration aspects, as well as a folder full of rulers that are already centered properly for all sorts of different symmetrical designs. Which, by the way, in case you didn't know, you can drag rulers onto different layers and folders in Clip Studio Paint to change what they affect. So this big folder at the top just acts as data storage for a bunch of ruler presets. Another big notable thing I made was a heat map to indicate how safe it is to put design elements in specific areas. The hotter a color is, the more you shouldn't put design elements there. Very simple logic. And I also tried to make it not super eye-straining to look at by softening the colors. Just a little itty-bitty quality of life touch. And on top of that, another cool Clip Studio thing, I set the heat map, guides, and rulers to draft layers. So, as long as you have exporting draft layers unchecked in Clip Studio, you don't have to worry about them being visible in final versions by accident. Now, what's super cool about this template is that you can download it. It's a resource that is available to you as well. I am charging $2 for the template because it's making use of my technical skills and the effort I've spent learning how to use my software, but I think that's a fair trade to streamline your art fight prep, and that way you don't have to make the template yourself. It's just ready to go. It's made primarily for Clip Studio Paint, but there is a .psd version as well as separated PNGs for you to use in whatever art programs you'd like. Just keep in mind that the rulers and draft layers might not translate to other software. This template is going to be provided as is. Not to mention, if my art fight prep has helped you out this year, buying this little template is a great way to basically throw me a tip. You get a resource and I get money for groceries so I can live and keep making videos. However, I will have the borders I'm making in this video available for free, so if you want to use them, you can download them over at my VGen, linked in the description. But enough about that. From here, I jumped into actually painting my borders. I started with Team Tragedy because, well, I knew I wanted to do Mystery last since that's my team this year, and I wanted to be a little bit selfish and make sure I had all the kinks worked out before I got to the one for my team. Especially since for each of these designs, I set myself a soft limit of about an hour per border. For this design, I focused on a sort of rainy theme, blocking in really heavy clouds and misty, wavy things. The main goal of these borders is to create something visually interesting to look at over being a realistic painting. To achieve that, I started out with the highest contrast colors to layer in and create appealing shapes. That means my clouds did eventually end up being very round and river pebble-like, but they still read as wet, so I think it works for Tragedy. The important thing about these is for them to feel good to look at, then to make perfect sense. They're only going to get displayed at 200 by 200 pixels and are meant to accent existing art. Overall, I am quite happy with how my first border turned out for this year. I think it feels appropriately sopping wet and sad for Team Tragedy, and will hopefully look super nice framing people's attacks. Next, I worked on Team Comedy. I took a different approach with this border. It was all about building up interesting shapes on top of some pre-made flame brush strokes. And once those brush strokes were laid, I used color jitter to add some variation, and I used that variation to refine further blocks of color that were pleasing to look at. The entire process of the comedy border was very organic and focused on feeling things out, except for the little props that I decided to add. Normally, I stick to one layer for these borders, but I made an exception for the sake of quality of life making the props. I did a little Joker card and a bell, like you'd find on a jester's hat, just to add a little something to this card to make it pop. What is super cool about this piece is that since I let myself experiment, I discovered how to do lineless rendering in a way that I feel is super appealing. It's definitely something I'll have to play around with more, but this border was definitely a nice testament to the value of experimenting with my art and trusting the process. And, of course, last but certainly not least, I worked on the Team Mystery design. I took a similar approach as the comedy design, using a brush to lay down some interesting shapes and let the design emerge from there. Something really fun about brushes and symmetry tools in Clip Studio is that brushes don't always perfectly follow rulers depending on the brush settings. So, in this case, it will create similar shapes that aren't exactly the same. Even though I'm using a brush to speed up the process, there doesn't end up being a lot of repetition in the design. Another thing I made use of with this design is bringing in some vagueness about just what kind of material the frame is made from. On one hand, you can see it as smoke. On another, perhaps gnarled branches, or maybe even twisting silk based on the way it shines. That sort of vagueness ties into the mystery theme very nicely, and it makes you question exactly what you're looking at. And finally, you may have already noticed it at this point in the video, but I also added splashes of other team colors to each border. Even though I will always rep my team and lean into it because it's fun, I think it's important to acknowledge the spirit of Art Fight a bit artistically. The point of the event is to have fun, to celebrate each other's OCs together. There would be no Art Fight without the other teams, so they deserve a little nod in each of the borders. And that's my Art Fight borders this year. If you'd like to use them, they're available to download for free at my VGen, linked in the description below. And if you'd like to take a crack at designing your own borders or drop a little tip in my hat as thanks for the prep help this year, you can buy the template at the very same link for $2. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you had a good old time listening to me talk about the design process, and if you worked on anything during this video, tell me about it. I love knowing what creative things people get up to during these. In the meantime, don't forget to like and subscribe, as that's what tells the algorithm gods that this video is worth watching, and I will perhaps even see you on the Art Fight battlefield. Be cozy, be kind, and make something cool.